Temple Prison. Paris, January 21. 1793. The cannon fire that announced Louis XVI's execution echoed through the stone tower where Marie Antoinette sat with her two surviving children, 14-year-old Marie-Thérèse and 8-year-old Louis Charles. She had not been allowed to say goodbye to her husband. She had not been permitted to attend his trial. She learned of his death from the silence that followed the cannon's roar. Then, from the revolutionary songs that rose from the streets below, celebrating the end of the monarchy. Her son asked why the people were singing. She pulled him close and did not answer. For the next 5 months, the family remained imprisoned together in the medieval fortress that had once belonged to the Knights Templar. The tower was suffocating damp stone walls, narrow windows that admitted little light, guards who watched their every movement and reported everything to the Committee of Public Safety. Marie Antoinette, now 37 years old and stripped of her title as queen, tried to maintain normalcy for her children. She taught them lessons. She prayed with them each night when the roar of revolutionary mobs swelled outside the walls. She held them close and promised them safety she knew she could not guarantee. But the guards noticed something crucial: she could endure anything except harm toward her children. The revolutionaries had discovered her one true vulnerability, and they were about to exploit it with calculated precision: the psychological destruction of prisoner 280. The number that would replace her name would not begin with chains or threats or the guillotine blade. It would begin with an 8-year-old boy torn from his mother's arms in the middle of the night. What happened during the final 76 days between July 3 and October 16, 1793, was not simply imprisonment. It was systematic psychological warfare designed to dismantle a human being, one deliberate piece at a time. The guillotine that ended Marie Antoinette's life on October 16 was mercy. What came before it was something far darker, and it began at midnight on July 3 when 6 guards burst through her door to take away the last thing she had left to lose. July 3, 1793, approximately 10:00 p.m. Marie Antoinette was lying beside Louis Charles in his narrow bed in their tower chamber. Her hand rested on his chest. She had not let him out of her sight for the 5 months since they executed his father. Then came the sound of boots on the stone stairs. Heavy and purposeful. Getting closer. The door burst open. 6 guards stormed in, carrying torches that made the shadows leap across the walls. One held a document from the Committee of Public Safety, an official order. They had come to take the boy for re-education under the Republic. What happened next lasted a full hour and was documented years later by Marie-Thérèse, who witnessed everything from the adjoining room. Her mother transformed instantly from composed to feral. Marie Antoinette threw herself between the guards and her son, clutching Louis Charles so tightly he woke screaming in confusion. She unleashed a sound so raw it seemed to come from somewhere primal, not a former queen, but simply a mother fighting for her child. "You will not take him," she screamed, her voice splintering. "You will have to kill me first. He is just a child." For 60 shattering minutes, she blocked the doorway physically, fighting 6 grown men with nothing but desperation. She hurled her body against them when they tried to pass. She begged them to take her instead. She offered anything, everything. The guards threatened her. They threatened her daughter. They warned that if she didn't comply, they would use force and someone would be hurt. Louis Charles clung to his mother, sobbing. not understanding why these men wanted to separate them. Marie-Thérèse and her aunt Madame Elisabeth pleaded with Marie Antoinette to stop before the violence escalated. Finally, her sister-in-law, Madame Elisabeth, convinced her that continued resistance would only traumatize the children further and might result in someone being physically injured. Marie Antoinette broke. She kissed Louis Charles one final time, whispered something no witness recorded, and watched as the guards pried her son from her arms and dragged him down the stone stairs. His screams faded into the corridors below. She collapsed on the floor and did not move for hours, her body shaking silently. The revolutionaries delivered Louis Charles into the hands of Antoine Simon, a radical cobbler from the Faubourg Saint-Antoine who had been selected specifically for his lack of compassion toward the former royal family. Simon's assignment was not guardianship. It was political indoctrination and systematic abuse designed to break an 8-year-old boy's loyalty to his mother. Louis Charles was locked in a windowless room several floors below where his mother remained imprisoned. He could hear her sometimes through the thick stone, and she could hear him both crying out for each other across the tower that kept them separated. Simon forced the boy to wear a red Phrygian cap, the symbol of revolutionary liberty. He taught him to sing anti-monarchy songs mocking his parents. He made him chant, "Long live the Republic," and curse the memory of his father. When Louis Charles resisted or cried for his mother, Simon beat him. When he refused to eat, Simon starved him. When he begged to see his family, Simon kept him in isolation until obedience became the only path to survival. Within weeks, the boy began to repeat whatever they told him, not because he understood the words, but because compliance meant less pain. The Committee of Public Safety had a specific purpose for this torture. They were preparing Louis Charles to provide testimony that would be weaponized against his mother during her eventual trial. They needed him to say things so grotesque, so impossible, that Marie Antoinette's defense would be shattered not by evidence, but by the violation of the most fundamental bond between mother and child. Marie Antoinette knew nothing of these specific details, but every maternal instinct told her that her son was suffering. She could do nothing. She was powerless. That helplessness was the entire point of the exercise. The revolutionaries had learned that physical deprivation could not break her. She had endured hunger, cold, and humiliation without surrendering her dignity. But they discovered she could be broken through her children, and they exploited that vulnerability with methodical cruelty that would intensify over the next month. August 1. Etienne Tibet Joshua at 2:00 a.m. Less than a month after they tore Louis Charles away, Marie Antoinette was jolted awake by guards flooding into her chamber in the Temple Tower. No explanation was given. No time to prepare, just an abrupt order that she was being transferred to a different prison. They were separating her from her daughter Marie-Thérèse and her sister-in-law, Madame Elisabeth. For the first time in her life of practiced royal composure, she begged to say goodbye to her daughter. Begged for 5 minutes. Begged for anything. The guards refused. They dragged her down the stairs where she had last seen her son vanish 5 weeks earlier, shoved her into a closed carriage, and drove her through the sleeping streets of Paris toward a place every prisoner feared: the conciergerie. The conciergerie was not simply a prison, it was the antechamber to the guillotine, officially known as the waiting room for death. It was where condemned prisoners spent their final days before execution at the Place de la Révolution. No one was transferred to the conciergerie unless their death was already decided. Marie Antoinette understood this immediately. When she arrived before dawn on August 1, she was no longer addressed as Madame or even widow. Capet, the revolutionaries stripped her name entirely and replaced it with a number. She became prisoner 280, a designation that erased even the pretense of her humanity.